The protesters' message is really quite simple. No war. That is what we see people chanting. We see them carrying signs that say those things. It's a very visceral, emotional reaction to this war, which to many Russians is kind of unfathomable, that Russia would be attacking Ukraine.
Since the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that has killed thousands and displaced millions, much of the world has condemned President Vladimir Putin. And while many in Russia support their leader, an increasing number of Russians who oppose Putin's actions are speaking out and putting themselves in danger in the process.
There have been quite a few protests in Russia since the war started, in over 100 Russian cities and towns. And we know that more than 15,000 detentions have taken place over the course of the last month from those various protests. It takes a great deal of bravery to go out and participate in protests in an authoritarian state.
The Kremlin attempts to control information by banning social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And it most recently passed a law that criminalizes the intentional spreading of what Moscow deems fake news. But Putin's rule with an iron fist is exhibited most in how he silences dissent in public.
Russians who come out and protest publicly risk several things. First of all, obviously, they risk being detained, which can lead to either administrative fines or prison sentences. But they also risk longer-term impacts. They might be thrown out of college or university, they might be dismissed from their job, they might come under some forms of social ostracism.
Я против войны. Не хочу, чтобы там кто-то гибли наши люди, или они вообще против. Считаю, что Путин агрессор.
Считаю, что это позор для россиян, поэтому я здесь пришел вот с этим плакатом, где написано, что нет войны на Украине.
Putin, who led Russia from 2000 to 2008 and then again from 2012 until today, has periodically implemented policies strengthening his rule over the Russian people.
Vladimir Putin has been ratcheting up the pressure internally really for the last 22 years. It started in the 2000s when he first became president. Putin took control over the media and made sure there were no television channels of any size that were disloyal to him. Then he started to put in place restrictions on civil society organizations, and there were also limits put on authorized protests.
After reports of ballot rigging of legislative elections in late 2011, thousands of Russians took to the streets in protest, which continued after Putin's re-election in March 2012.
We saw large numbers of Russians come out on the streets, especially in Moscow, where several protests were around 80 or 100,000 people. Those were the largest protests that Russia had seen since the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Later, Putin created the Russian National Guard, a unit made up of over 300,000 troops under the guise of safeguarding its borders and protecting public order.
And I think it's really uncontroversial that this organization was set up to protect the Putin regime against his own citizens. So it was there for the repression of domestic protest and disapproval with the government.
More recently, opposition leader Alexei Navalny drew widespread attention when he challenged Putin's policies. He was sentenced to at least 9 years in prison under Russia's anti-extremist law, which is being used to silence opponents.
So as we know, Navalny was the victim of a state assassination attempt and then thrown in prison. His organization has been dismantled, and most of his top members of his team have been forced to flee the country.
The narrative around this war in Ukraine differs dramatically in and outside of Russia. The state-controlled media refers to it as a special military operation, and Putin continues to falsely claim that Ukraine is run by neo-Nazis. With the US, Europe, and others enacting numerous sanctions on Russia, its economic outlook looks uncertain, at least in the near term. So how does that change the prospect of future protests in Russia?
I think the more interesting question going forward is not simply those who are out on the streets because they're very much opposed to the war, but whether the economic situation, high inflation, increasing unemployment, and those sorts of issues will also bring out a larger group of protesters. If Russian protests become much larger in the coming weeks and months, I think we will see a concerted effort by the Russian state and the Russian authorities to crack down hard on those protests. I expect we would see increasing arrests, increasing publicity about fines and prison sentences to try and scare and deter average Russians from joining the protests.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.